It's obvious that you listen to this show to hear about and support other people's dreams. But what about yours? What is your dream project? I'm here to help you break through whatever is in the way of your dreams and get you to the finish line. Go to dreamingbigcoaching.com today and take the first step. Literally, it's a button you can click to sign up for a free consultation with me. Let's find out if I can help you reach your goal. Click on Take the First Step. It's that simple to start the rest of your life. Get coached by Rob Southgate at dreamingbigcoaching.com. Look, we're all nerds here. Todd Stashwick's Nerd Circus is a great place to pick up nerdy paraphernalia and groovy wares. How about some sweet lava lamp dice? Or maybe a funky 70s Rec Room Nerd Circus dice box? Does that do anything for you? Need a drink? What about the book Mystic Libations? Critical cocktails for the thirsty adventurer. Look, Todd Stashwick's Nerd Circus is the place for nerdy threads, cool tabletop gifts, and more. Go to thenerdcircus.com and check out the cool stuff. Oh yeah, and let them know the TTRPG Insider sent you. Welcome back again to TTRPG Insider. I am your host, Rob Southgate. TTRPG Insider is a podcast about tabletop role-playing games and the people who create them. Every episode, I interview someone who's involved in the making of these games that we all love to play. I want to hear the stories of their lives, what inspires them, what they have fun with, how they got into TTRPG, not just a description of the game. You can follow TTRPG Insider on Facebook by searching for TTRPG Insider. I also have a Twitter handle at TTRPG Insider. Shocking, right? I plan to add other social media, but for now, that's the best place. If you want to email me, you can send me an email directly to rob@ttrpginsider.com. This month, we're featuring Cthulhu Dreamt by Action Fiction. They have a Kickstarter campaign running currently through September 8th, 2023. Please support Cthulhu Dreamt, both financially and by sharing it across your social media. You never know who's going to fall in love with this game. So go to Kickstarter and search for Cthulhu Dreamt, or simply click on the link in our show notes today. Today's guest is Runa Fletcher, one of the writers of Cthulhu Dreamt by Action Fiction. Here's Runa. Hi, Runa. Welcome to TTRPG Insider. I'm really excited to talk to you. You know, anyone that listens, that I love the authors, and if we've got one here. Before I get into that, Runa, why don't you tell people about yourself?
Hey, Rob, I'm super excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this. I am a disabled author. That's my cat. Sorry.
That's okay. There's a good chance my cat's going to show up during this too.
I'm a disabled author. I live in Texas for now. I have worked on over a dozen different tabletop RPGs. I do short fiction. I do novels. I've scripted a few comic books. I do a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, and it says here that you publish urban dark fantasy. Is it like, I see on there you also have sci-fi, so is that kind of your area, sci-fi, fantasy, that whole thing?
I really like the areas where like science fiction and fantasy kind of collide. So, for example, my urban fantasy series, a lot of it takes a look at the scientific aspects of like the socioeconomic situation. For example, my urban fantasy stuff is set in a world that has, a layered sub-society structure. So, for example, you've got this group called the Covenant. It's all of the monsters that you would like think about typically in a fantasy setting. Vampires that aren't really vampires, they're similar, but stuff like that.
Yeah, the creatures of the night, they're all inhabiting
Yes.
that area.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And then they are essentially running roughshod over the remnants of the Fae. So a big thing I do in my stories is explore the systematic inequities between those two groups.
Okay.
In a way that doesn't bring real life race into it, but allows people to still read and experience and see it.
Sure.
If that makes any sense.
It truly does. Absolutely.
I also really enjoy, I started a new project recently that is what I call paleopunk.
Okay.
So it's like a genre that I've seen kind of developing over time. Think of it like Horizon Zero Dawn is like the perfect example of paleopunk. Humanity used to have this super high level of technology, and now they don't anymore. And then you explore the remnant technologies and what caused the fall in the technological level.
Sure.
And I feel like that's what really brings it the punk label, because punk stories, steampunk, diesel punk, cyberpunk, all seem to have, social examination.
Yeah.
At their core.
Yeah. And a lot of them deal with this. The technology has corrupted or broken down, and now it's still around, or they're dealing with it. So yeah, I totally see the world you're working in. That kind of urban fantasy. I'm actually getting reminded of kind of like what Shannara started to do, where it's in a fantasy setting, but wait a minute, this is spoiler, it's after the fall of technology. So yeah, I really dig that. That's very, very cool.
Yeah, those are the two that I'm working on, the two settings that I'm working in mostly right now. Because a lot of my previous work belonged to a now defunct TTRPG company, and the worlds and stuff were purchased by, I think it's Chaos Eye Games.
Okay.
And I don't even know if they're still running, so I just don't have access to that stuff. So right. I've got urban fantasy set in, like, it's essentially the real life world, but like, it's fantasy. And I've specifically put dark urban fantasy because, well, a lot of my publications are in horror for a reason.
Oh, I love that too.
Yeah. I like dark suspense horror.
Sure.
And then the paleopunk setting, which I'm hoping to put out I'm kind of taking a the Witcher books approach to it, where it's a series of short stories. And I'm hoping to put the first one of those out in the next few months. It depends on my medical situation.
I was reaching for a book as you were talking. It's reminding me, because I'm going to say the name wrong, but it reminds me of Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. Did you ever read those fantasy books?
No.
They're by Fritz Lieber. Now, it's not a fantasy, or it's a total fantasy setting, but these Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser books, first of all, they're fantastic. Second of all, they are short stories. It's like building this world, but it's all through short stories. I absolutely love it. So instead of one, giant Lord of the Rings novel, it's all these books. They do bleed together. They do have a cohesive world, but they're kind of the adventures of these characters. And it's, oh God, it's so good. And what you're saying reminds me of that, where instead of one massive 3,000 page omnibus of one big story, it's a bunch of short stories like The Witcher, which I think is just so great. So great. I just had a conversation with yep, I'm going to lose that too. I guess I haven't had enough coffee yet today. I just had a conversation with somebody the other day about my love of short stories and how indie films, like short indie films, short stories, and then collecting them together, it tells you a different story, and how much I really enjoy that, because it excites the brain. It makes me go, what else? What else? As opposed to here's everything else and keep eating, like a Stephen King novel that goes on for days, and you go, oh, his short stories really light me up. His long form is cool, but I get what you're saying. I dig it. I dig it.
I feel like it gives me the opportunity to explore several vastly different perspectives and how they interlink. Like the paleopunk story, I have 3 different main characters, and like their paths cross, but not necessarily at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Like they may all have they'll all have a different adventures that take place around this same group of hunter-gatherers.
Yeah.
But they never actually like meet each other, at least at first.
So, but there is the stories are intertwined in some way.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I dig that. That also makes sense that you are in the TTRPG world, because I feel as a player that happens a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that. That's actually one of my favorite things, especially if I take a character and I get to guest on another game, and you kind of have this other adventure that your players didn't experience, and then you get to talk about it with them, and it's like, wow, we're kind of intersecting these worlds. It's all kind of happening, but maybe not simultaneously. Maybe this is an old story. Maybe this is a new story. It's just very cool. I love that.
I actually make a habit. I have a custom system that I designed that I use with my like core group of, I've collected a group of players over time who are very obsessed with digging deep into lore.
Okay.
And so whenever I'm setting up a new setting, or even like the urban fantasy setting, I've been piecing that one together, doing the world building on that one for like 15 years.
Sure.
And using this system, I call it the Destiny system. I run games for them. So I spend a lot of time designing how this world works in a game way.
Sure.
So that these players can then run around and do their crazy stuff and explore, and it forces me to develop a deeper and richer setting than I ordinarily would.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, you said you've written for TTRPG. What kind of stuff? What were you writing for? Is there anything we'd know? Aside from Cthulhu Dreamt, we're going to talk about that in a minute.
You may have heard of them, but the company, I don't remember when they officially went under, but it was a long time ago. I worked on a high fantasy setting called The Dreaming. I worked on a superhero setting called Legacy Crossing. I worked on a steam diesel cyberpunk setting called SDC Punk.
Cool.
I worked on a horror setting called Nod East of Eden.
I like it.
And I worked on, I'm blanking on the last one. Oh, it was a hard sci-fi setting called Jump 305.
Ah, so cool. So cool. So would you say your inspiration as far as writing, I mean, I know TTRPG often you're a hired gun, but would you say in your writing in general, because we're going to lump it all together. Would you say that you bend toward the sci-fi, that you bend toward the fantasy, or is it really like, man, this week it's fantasy, next week it's sci-fi, the next week it's just all diesel punk?
I definitely bend towards sci-fi only because, like I said, I like to take diverse but real scientific principles and apply them to my work. For example, in the paleo-punk setting, it looks a lot like paleo fantasy because there's quote-unquote magic in it, but really it breaks down into the remnant technology and how it's being portrayed and used by the characters.
Sure.
I like being able to back up pieces of my stories with actual research. It might not all be like fancy lasers and stuff, but like
right.
I can be scrolling through the BBC and see like a new socioeconomic thing that just came out, and it may inspire a whole new world just because that is a cool thing I want to explore.
Yeah, I get that.
Mostly I bend towards horror. There are horror elements in everything that I write. I used to hate writing horror, but a very dear and unfortunately dearly departed friend of mine, John Manning, who was a very big fish in a few different medium-sized ponds. He asked me to write a short story for a horror compilation.
Okay.
And that was when I discovered that, like, oh, apparently I have a gift for horror. Because my very first short story publication through him got I didn't quite get a nomination, but I made the like nominations for a nomination.
Cool.
For the Bram Stoker.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, it was very exciting because it was totally unexpected. It's not like I was gunning for it.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. Now, have you ever gotten that close again?
Unfortunately, no, because most of the stuff that I sold between then and John's death never actually made it into publication because his health started failing. And so like years and years of stories that I sold to his publishing company like never actually made it out. It would be really cool. I actually have some hopes for stories I've got in the pipeline. My book that's coming out later this year, Almost Dead. It is set in that sci-fi setting, or not the sci-fi setting, the urban fantasy setting.
Uh-huh.
I have some hopes for that. I'm not like holding my breath. I'm not even really crossing my fingers because it's the sort of thing that like, it just seems to happen. If you expect it, it's just, you're going to be disappointed.
Right.
But it would be nice. And I feel like the story is good enough that I wouldn't feel weird about it. I'd be like, oh, that's awesome. Somebody appreciates the story. That's fantastic.
Sure. But if it doesn't happen, it's all right.
It's
you
whatever.
Still did something cool. Yeah.
I have always held the philosophy, like, I'm under no delusions. You don't write a lot because you dream of becoming Jim Butcher or Stephen King.
Right.
You write a lot because you want people to read your stories. So virtually everything that I publish, although I haven't decided about the book yet, but virtually everything that I publish is available for free because I just want people to read and enjoy it.
Sure. You just want to put it out there. Yeah, that makes sense. That's like podcasting, Yeah. We struggle with the concept of, I do work hard at this. It would be nice to get paid something, but at the same time, we just want to. We just got to talk it out. We just got to get it out there. And I can see that from a writer's standpoint. I can see it from an artist standpoint. It's once again, go back to TTRPG creators. How many of them are on Drive-Thru RPG giving their stuff away because they're like, look, I just want people to play it. I want them to experience this world. So who are the horror authors that you love?
Honestly, I think the only one that I can say that I really draw inspiration from is, the oldie classic Poe. I really like that there's so much psychological element in there.
Yeah.
There's so much that's just, let's take something, a setting, an inclination, a intrusive thought that virtually everyone can relate to, even if they haven't directly experienced it, and then take it to its illogical conclusion.
Sure.
I actually mostly read sci-fi and urban fantasy myself.
Let's hear who are your sci-fi authors.
C.S. Friedman is definitely my favorite sci-fi author.
Oh, good one. Okay.
This Alien Shore is one of those books that shaped my childhood in a lot of ways.
Sure.
And my favorite author of all time is Seanan McGuire. I adore Seanan.
Cool. I'm going to put links in the show notes to some of these things so people can look this up if they are not familiar. So,
oh yeah, definitely they should check out Seanan. Yeah,
I'm putting it down. And in fact, I don't think I have any Seanan McGuire, so I think an order might have to be placed after this.
Oh yeah, interview. You should check out Encrypted if you like a series that's got more of that sci-fi feel where she breaks it down to here's the scientific reason why a cockatrice can turn people to stone.
Right. Yeah, I do. I actually love that.
And her October Day series, one of the one of the things that gets said a lot in the early October Day books is the protagonist tells her husband, I'm trying to avoid spoilers because it's a good series, but she tells her husband, I love you more than fairy tales. And that was the whole theme from my wedding to my wife.
Oh, I love that.
I love you more than fairy tales.
That is so fantastic.
Yeah.
That is really fantastic.
Yeah, she's an amazing author. She's one of those authors that if I ever could get just famous enough to sit on a panel with her, I'd be like, I've made it. This is the peak.
Pinnacle of everything. Yeah, I get it. I get it. That is really cool. Well, I've written them down. And like I said, for the listener, we'll put that stuff in the show notes so you can check this out too. I love getting these type of recommendations. I know that I find a lot of people and authors from this. It used to be you had to look through books. I remember in The Dark Half, Stephen King had a point when the writer that it's about mentioned 4 books that were in his stack that he was reading right then. And I ran right out and bought all 4. And that's how I found The Ceremonies from T.E.D. Klein, which is an amazing book. Who heard of it before that? It was wow, he just mentioned this in the book as the author's favorite. And it turned out to be this amazing book. And I remember just a couple of years ago, I wrote something and Joe Hill responded and I mentioned that book and he was like, oh my God, nobody's read that book. What a great book. And I thought, Stephen was telling the audience, read this. So now I try to do the same thing. Read this, That is really cool. Now, in tabletop, what is your history with tabletop? Since that's what this show is about, were you always a player? Is it one of those things you kind of fell into the writing? What's your history with it?
I have played in one campaign ever, and it was when I was in middle school, and it was Old World of Darkness. So, like, I think it was just when the second edition Vampire the Masquerade stuff came out.
Yeah.
It was Werewolf the Apocalypse. I got to play like a 6-session campaign.
And that was it.
I made a terrible mistake. I offered to GM.
Oops. Especially that early in it. Oops.
Yeah. I never got to stop. I ended up, that game evolved into like a 3-year long 50 to 60 person LARP, and that only fell apart because that was basically when I was in college.
Okay.
And then after college, stuff kind of...
Yeah, things change.
Yeah. And then I was like, you know what? I love this system. And I loved D&D, but I thought I could do better. So I fell in with, they were called PTME Productions. They were the ones that made those games that
you mentioned before.
Yeah.
Sure.
And after that fell apart for a whole bunch of reasons, I kind of stuck to just writing stories.
Sure.
For a little while. And then I saw, I think it was College Humor started Dimension 20. And they were doing 5e, and I started seeing all of the cool 5e mechanics, and I was like, okay, this is pretty slick.
Yeah.
So I started running 5e with a group of local friends. And then I ended up running 5e all over town, because it turns out that pre-COVID, people were willing to pay to bring a published author in to GM their stories.
Ah.
Now everybody knows how to GM.
Right.
So there's
we had 3 years to learn it, right?
Yeah. And honestly, some of the stories that these people are like, oh, I've never written a short story in my life, but they tell the coolest D&D stories.
Right.
Now that my disability has really kind of taken over my life, I'm wheelchair bound outside of the house. So like my players have to come to me.
Sure.
So I run Pathfinder 2E because we switched from 5E to Pathfinder because it was crunchier, and I was running with a group of people that really like the crunchy stuff.
Yeah.
And, I stole my favorite rules from 5e. Like, you can cast a lot of people cantrips. Cast as many cantrips as you want.
Yeah, cool.
The way death saves work and everything. And I also run with my custom system. I run for the paleopunk setting and my urban fantasy setting. I run those games, so that I have basically two games a week minimum, and some of them, the players I have for the urban fantasy game are intense, like 72 straight hours of gaming. I'm
not doing that.
No, it's so much. I like, when I was younger, when I was working with PTME, I did at least one convention once a month. plus mini conventions that were held at the offices for the owners.
Sure.
So nothing to stay up for 72 hours straight. And now I'm like, no, man, we've been doing this for 8 hours. I need a break.
Yeah. Yeah, it gets to be too much. Although when you're younger, you just keep throwing pizza at it. And I mean, I remember those marathon sessions when I was in high school, and you're just like, this is the greatest thing, As I got older, you sit in a coffee shop and play with your friends, and after about 4 hours, you go, oh boy. I'm wondering when I'm going to get to go home and go to bed. Anybody young in this group?
Oh, yeah. Just when pizza and energy drinks were all it took.
Right. Now it takes a little bit more.
Yeah.
So Cthulhu Dreamt, you wrote on Cthulhu Dreamt. What is it that do you have anything specific you contributed that you'd want to talk about?
I did the script for a comic book that they are planning on using for.
Yeah, absolutely. I had the artist on here.
Oh, fantastic.
Oh, yeah, great. Oh, I'm super excited for that.
Yeah, me too. I've been watching how the art's coming together. It's really cool.
Yeah, it is.
It was great getting to work with snails. We've known each other for a while, but this is the first time I've actually gotten to work on one of the projects. It's interesting because it's not the stuff I normally write, but the world was deep enough, it was rich enough that it was super easy for me to find.
There's a lot to write about in that world. And I'll also say, if you haven't got a lot of experience writing comic books, that is a new experience in and of itself as well.
Oh, yes. I've been writing comic scripts since college. And unfortunately, every single script I have ever written that has been purchased, either the artist fell through or the person who purchased it ended up screwing over both the artist and myself. That working by commission, that happens a lot.
If this was a Disney movie, we'd start singing Tale as Old as Time right now, because that has happened
right?
so many times with people I've interviewed on this and on Alley Chats and on my various shows. I've heard that story so many times. It sucks.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's not the purchaser's fault. Like with PTME, I did something like 20 comic scripts. I did Miracle Girl. Well, honestly, I'd have to pull up a list. There's a big list of comics that I sold them, and then the company went under before they.
It happens,
them.
Right?
That's not their fault.
Yeah, they're not screwing you over, but it's gone now.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm working, like, I have an art friend. So I'm hoping that since we have a friend relationship, we can work together on a project and then put it out on like a Patreon and share the profits and stuff like that.
Sure. Or if you want to Kickstarter it or something, you can always reach out. I have a show called Go Fund This. I'd put you on.
Oh, really?
And actually, I could put that on. I could put your Patreon on that too. It's whenever somebody has some type of crowdfunding, whether it's a Patreon, if they do a podcast on Buy Me Coffee, it's eligible to be on Go Fund This. So
that's cool.
If you got a creative endeavor you want to get some funding for and make people aware of, Runa, the door is wide open to you.
I may take you up on that. That would be very interesting.
Yeah, I'd love to have you on to talk about it.
Yeah, I've never done a Kickstarter or any kind of crowdfunding thing before outside of Cthulhu Dreamt, but I'm not really doing the crowdfunding side of that. That's action fiction.
Yeah,
who are amazing to work with, by the way.
They're great.
They're very good. They are taking every single precaution they can to not screw over their contributors.
Oh, no, they're fantastic.
So rare.
Yeah.
Like, I stopped writing for anybody but myself shortly before the pandemic because I got hired by a company. I won't say who. I got a contract and everything. And then I had a MS flare and couldn't, they extended the deadline for me. Great. Everything was ready. And then that big blizzard hit Texas. Knocked out all of our power.
Yeah, the power grid one. Yeah.
So I couldn't submit it.
Oh.
And when I came online, I got a message that I had been kicked off of their Slack server and everything. And I'm like, I've got a contract right here, man. I probably could have made a fuss about it, but I was like, I don't think I actually want to work for somebody who's going to treat their contributors like that. So
right, exactly.
But that put me in a big funk. And having Snails be like, hey, would you be interested in doing this comic for Cthulhu Dreamt? That's kind of given me the spark back. So
excellent.
If anybody's looking for a published author to help with a project, like Discord is by far the easiest way to reach me.
Fantastic. You and I'll talk when we're done with this interview, believe it or not.
Exciting.
So that brings us to the end here. Runa, where can people find you? And just so that you know and the audience knows, I've got all of this in the show notes. So where do you think is the best place people can reach out to you?
Hands down, the absolute best way to get a hold of me is via my Discord. I am reasonably active on Patreon. I don't post as much as I should because I try not to tell people something's coming unless it's done and in the editing phase.
Sure.
So I love my Patreon followers. They get a thank you in the back of everything I do because they're invaluable. My Patreon is what's allowing me to put out Almost Dead later this year, which is a full-length novel in that urban fantasy setting. Their support is the reason I am able to put my stories out into the world.
Runa, thank you so much for coming on. And everybody, check out Runa's stuff. Support her on Patreon. We've got the links in the show notes. Reach out to Runa in her Discord and follow the amazing things she's doing. I mean, I'm so in love with this, and I'm in love with this Cthulhu Dreamt project. You definitely want to get in and find this comic book when it's available. So, Runa, again, thank you so much for being on, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you for having me. I love being on podcasts, especially one that's so engaging like this. It's been wonderful.
I love to hear that. Runa, thank you so much for coming on TTRPG Insider. If you or anyone you know has a crowdfunding effort about to launch or currently going, send them my way. I can feature their project on this show and on my other show, Go Fund This. I love to share cool TTRPG projects and to help people reach their goals. You can connect with me through the TTRPG Insider Facebook page or via email directly to rob@ttrpginsider.com. Please rate and review TTRPG Insider wherever you listen to this podcast. It really helps others find the show, which helps spread the word about our amazing guests and their incredible games. TTRPG Insider is a production of Southgate Media Group, hosted, edited, and produced by me, Rob Southgate. Thanks so much for listening to the TTRPG Insider.